Welcome back. The title of this mini lecture is British India. And so we're going to talk about 5 terms that, when it comes to knowing a bit about India and the Brits and colonialism and all that stuff, that it's good to understand as you do readings and as you learn more, right? So it's good to familiarize yourself with these terms. Let's dig in. The first is just colonialism. All right, so we tend to, I think, differentiate a bit between colonialism and imperialism, and both of these terms are very much going to have an effect across India. But colonialism, right, generally is the idea of a specific country that comes in and not just extends a sphere of influence into another country, but a country that takes the sovereignty of another country. Right, so they come in and they are in fact in political control over that state, not just cultural and all these other elements. And of course, this is what the British are going to construct with the colonial India that they develop in the 17th and 18th, 19th, and into the early 20th centuries. Right, so prior to partition, right, British India is going to include things like modern India, but also Pakistan and other nations as well. The second thing for us to know, the second term for us to be aware of, is what would be called factory forts. So the United Kingdom, the British, are not necessarily just going to be the only European powers that have some interest in India in the 16th and into the early 17th centuries. So certainly the French are going to have an interest, the Dutch are going to have an interest, and others as well. And the Portuguese and the Dutch and others would construct these what they called factory forts. And so these stable sort of fortresses that also served as these economic conduits for national mercantile policy for these different nations, right? Because part of the reason they're coming here is they want to certainly take over, but the idea is, of course, is they want to create an economic power dynamic, right, where resources are being sent back, they're bringing things over to here, and they're profiting, right? So this mercantilism of the 17th century, right, this is what they want to do, and these factory forts are going to be something that's going to help them to be able to achieve it. The third thing for us to know is something called the East India Company. Now, today, I think in the 21st century, so this is 2021 when I'm recording this, we're aware of big companies, right? The Amazons of the world, the Starbuckses of the world, the Apples of the world, the Huaweis of the world. So not just the U.S., but other nations have very large multinational corporations. The East India Company is perhaps one of the originators of this, right? So it grows out of a time of mercantilism in Europe in the 17th century, which is a fancy way of saying, state-controlled capitalism. And so the East India Company represented this sort of melding between private interests and centralizing nation-states in Europe in the 17th century. And the East India Company is going to be the primary actor, or a key primary actor, in establishing English control across India in the 17th, 18th, and into the 19th centuries. And this isn't exactly a force of goodwill, right? This is a force that extends itself through power and war and division, which kind of brings us to our fourth point, which is really kind of 2 wars or 2 terms for us. So one is the 7 Years' War, and then the other is something called the Sepoy Rebellion. So the East India Company works more strongly with the British military in the mid-18th century during what's called the 7 Years' War, which in many ways was sort of a first world war because the British are fighting the French and they're fighting other forces to try to consolidate their power globally. Well, that global power consolidation under the guise of the East India Company, especially throughout British India, will by 1857 be born out of this colonial imperial state which the British are not exactly, they're not known for being particularly culturally sensitive, especially in India here. And so there are a number of situations which will lead to 1857 where these sepoy troops will rebel against and begin a larger rebellion across India against British rule. And of course, this is put down violently, and many thousands of individuals are killed here in a very brutal putting down of a rebellion. But the Sepoy Rebellion in 1857 is going to be something here as well. So the fifth point for us, the last point for us, is something called the Indian Civil Service. So, many folks are familiar with things like caste systems and this, that, and the other in India. So you already have these power dynamics and racialized dynamics that are at work here. But on top of all of that, you have the British dynamic as well, the colonial dynamic of power, which much of this is going to be run out of something called the Indian Civil Service. Now, the civil service system has only a few thousand individuals, but these are going to be the colonial administrators for the entirety of the British Empire across India, and an incredibly prominent and important force for really understanding the nature of the British Raj. All right, thanks so much.